the Leadership Matters conversation, keeping you and your team safe and well. My name is Diana Belfon, and I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Specialist for Integrated Care Northamptonshire. It's my great pleasure to welcome you this morning to this session. Can we have the next slide, please? Before we start, we've got a few housekeeping messages for you. We would like to encourage you to keep your cameras on if you would like to, but we do know that the sensitivity of this subject being discussed today may not permit that. But if you'd like to, you have the option of keeping your cameras on. This is an interactive session, so we do welcome your questions. We have 3 options for you to choose from to ask your questions. You can use the raise hand function within MS Teams, or you can pop your question in the chat box and we will then retrieve your questions for you. Because of the sensitivity of today's subject, we've given you the option to ask your questions safely and anonymously using Slido, and I will show you how you can use Slido in a moment. Now, today's session will be recorded, and as you can see, this recording has started. Your microphones have been muted, and the reason for that is because we'd like to eliminate any background noises, especially when we're recording. Now, because today's session is recorded, our colleagues who are not joining us here today can watch this session on demand, or you can watch it back in your own time. Should we have any colleagues on the call today that are hard of hearing, you can use the transcript function. If you look at the top of your screen within MS Teams, there are 3 small dots. You can turn on the transcript function by clicking on those 3 dots. Now, this is really useful if you are hard of hearing, just like myself. Now, finally, we would encourage all colleagues on the call today to be respectful and courteous to each other and maintain that professional standard. Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? As previously said, you can ask your questions safely and anonymously. No one will know that it is you that have asked the question. You can do that in 2 ways. We have a Slido link for you, and Mariam will be popping that in the chat so you can click on the link, or alternatively, you can use the QR code which you can see on your screens. All you need to do is pop your phone up to the QR code to access the Slido. So I'll just let you do that for a couple of seconds before we move on. Next slide, please. So your facilitators today are myself, and also my fabulous, efficient colleague, Mariam Khalafi. Mariam is a health and wellbeing project manager for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland Integrated Care Board. So thank you once again, Mariam, for joining us here today. My pleasure, the next slide, will be to introduce your chairperson for the day, someone who I deeply respect and admire, Bina Katecha, who is our Deputy Chief Officer for Culture, Organisational Development and Inclusion. So I'd like to now hand you over to Bina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our session, which is about keeping you and your team safe. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. This is an interactive session, and you know, it's a real pleasure that we've been joined by 2 of our colleagues who I will introduce that are actually going to be presenting today. I just wanted to take a few moments to kind of share with you a little bit about myself. So I work across 2 systems. I work in LLR and in Northamptonshire. And particularly the work that I do in LLR, I lead the looking after our people work stream. And this is an area, keeping ourselves and our team safe. It's an area that I'm really, really committed to and passionate about. And I'm really pleased that we've got leaders not only across Northamptonshire, but we have colleagues joining us from the national team, from LLR, joining us on this session. So we've got colleagues from health, social care, charities, emergency services, and I'm really pleased that we take this topic seriously. I know how important it is to seek out support for yourselves and for others in keeping well. And I know I've had some really challenging times in the past. So more recently, my younger sister, she had cancer. It was the first time as a family we'd experienced cancer. And it was really important for me to be able to get some support in order to be able to help her through her journey. And so I think looking after ourselves, looking after each other should be our number one priority. Just in terms of depression, loneliness, well-being, we recognise at this point in time, we actually find that there's more people that actually experience domestic abuse. If you look at the evidence, more of our colleagues across all of our sectors are experiencing domestic abuse. And it's really important that we have an understanding about the support that's available for ourselves and the people we interact with. Equally, we know at this time of the year and at the start of the new year, this is really, really challenging time in terms of work pressures at home. And so it's really important that we support ourselves with depression, loneliness, our own well-being, and support each other, support those people that we interact with, and take care of ourselves and everybody around us. So it's fantastic that we're running this session. We need your involvement. We need you to look after you. We need you to look after each other and those people you interact with at work and outside work. So it gives me great pleasure now to introduce our first speaker. So we've got Gemma Sharman here, who's the training coordinator from domestic abuse. And then we'll move on to our depression, loneliness and wellbeing session. So Gemma, over to you to start the first part of our Leadership Matters conversations.
Thank you very much, Bina, and of course Diana. Very well spoken, both of you. So eloquent in your delivery. No pressure at all for me. As Bina and Diana have mentioned, my name is Gemma Sharman. I am the domestic abuse coordinator, coordinator for Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service. Now, hopefully you are familiar with our charity. Perhaps you have made referrals to us, worked alongside us, have personal experience of working with us. And if not, hopefully by the end of my conversation here, we'll have a bit more awareness about who we are and what we can do. So let me just take control of this. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see on the screen Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service. And then if I scroll across, I was asked to send a photograph of myself, and of course vanity got the better of me, and this is the best one I could find for my holiday. So it's a bit of a catfish photo, but here I am. And our vision is basically a world without domestic abuse where everyone is free from fear. And that shouldn't be so hard, should it? It shouldn't have to be a vision. We want our mission to be abolishing abuse for all, for everyone. We're a very inclusive charity. Just before I play this is a video, so I thought it was going to start then. Just a bit about our history. We used to be called Northampton Women's Aid, and that changed approximately 2017, I believe, when we became Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service. We felt that we needed that change because we were not able to support men, transgender people, non-binary people, and therefore we were not being inclusive. So now, as Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service, we can support anybody, no matter how they identify, through the experiences they've had. So I'll play this video. Hopefully the sound will work, so please let me know if not. I'll click play now. Okay, just a very small little clip there to explain a bit more about our service. I did see a few things in the chat there saying that you weren't able to see or hear. I hope most people are able to. I think it may be more to do with settings that you have on your in your app. I'm not sure really why some could and some couldn't hear that. Sorry. It is in the recording though, so it will be there. Let me move on to the next slide. So, what is domestic abuse? Domestic abuse, if I ask that as an open question, I imagine a lot of people would answer it is punching, it is kicking, it is hurting. And whilst that is true, and the government definition will show, there is more to it than physical abuse. It is any incident, pattern of threatening, coercive behaviour, it's violence, it's abuse, and it's between those people aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or family members, and it is regardless of gender and sexuality. Now, a long time, well, I'd say not a long time ago, it wasn't that long actually, we as a society referred to domestic abuse as domestic violence. And while that's still okay to say, domestic violence again doesn't include, or should I say, it sounds as though it excludes abuse. So domestic violence is very much part of the definition, but it didn't include all aspects of abuse, such as psychological abuse, physical abuse, of course, sexual abuse, financial and emotional abuse. And that's not an exhaustive list either. There is much more to it, coercive control, so much more happening these days. So we at NDAS will endeavour to support people through any form of abuse that they have suffered. So with physical abuse, what you may see in your line of work can include bruises, cuts, pulled hair, hair loss, such as alopecia, piercings being ripped out, burn marks, constant plaster casts, bite marks, bandages, I think there's one more, yep, strangulation marks. Now some of these people find easy to explain away. They fell, they tripped, they were play fighting with the kids, lots and lots of excuses that can explain or try and blame away some of these symptoms of physical abuse. Now, of course, if that becomes a pattern of behaviour, it is easier to see what's going on, and hopefully someone will speak up and ask for help. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. Physical abuse is not limited to these things alone. Oh, sorry, there's one last one there. Broken nails. So you may see broken nails and not think much of it at all, but actually it could be a sign of retaliation or self-defense. They've reached out and scratched their abuser, broken nail, and it might seem very minor, but actually it can be a very telling story. And in some cases, somebody once referred to it as a piece of a jigsaw puzzle. It was a piece that was missing. It made no sense on its own, but actually once you put it into place, it all added up and we could see the bigger picture. And sometimes that one thing we see could be what leads to ask the question, are you okay? Do you need help? Emotional abuse, again related to stress, which I believe we'll be covering in January in our next conference call. So what you may see, so skin conditions, alopecia as mentioned earlier, self-harm, depression, weight loss, change of appearance, flinching and jumping, anxiety, change in behaviour, and substance misuse. With weight loss, that can also see weight gain. And again, so much you'll see with emotional abuse. Skin conditions can flare up relating to stress, as I'm sure you're aware of. Self-harm, unfortunately, self-harm can sometimes come hand in hand with domestic abuse. It is a coping mechanism and a form of control that the person who's experiencing the abuse can regain control of. With weight loss, that can be because the perpetrator of the abuse isn't allowing their victim to have any food or food of nutritional value. Or it could be that the victim is making that choice consciously that they want to lose weight because perhaps the perpetrator doesn't want them to, and vice versa for gaining weight. So making themselves change their appearance to suit what either the perpetrator of their abuse is asking them to be, or to, in the perpetrator's eyes, look less appealing to other potential partners out there. Flinching and jumping ties in with anxiety, so loud noises, unexpected knocks at the door, all signs that this person could be experiencing domestic abuse. And substance misuse, again, there's a toxic trio: mental health, substance abuse, domestic abuse. So home visits. Now, this may or may not apply to some of you, but things you may see at a home visit. You may see damage to the property. And now this could be something very obvious, like a fist mark through the plasterboard, or someone's got lots and lots of photographs and posters in very unaesthetically pleasing places, perhaps on the walls. So it doesn't make sense why that picture is to the left when it should be central. Perhaps it's covering damage to the wall that somebody has caused. You may see, let me just go through some things before I start saying them all. So doors and windows punch marks, pictures randomly placed. Locks may be missing, so such as the bathroom, they may not have any room in that house that the victim of the abuse can lock to keep themselves safe. So if locks are missing, that could be a sign that that person is not allowed any privacy at all. And on the flip side of that, there may be locks on lots of rooms, but on the outside, so that it looks as though they're being locked in to a room. The home may be what we call show home appearance. And again, that's absolutely fine if you enjoy your home looking like that, and if you enjoy being neat and tidy, and especially with all these influencers at the minute on social media, putting a lot of pressure on people to do lots of, again, it's influencers. Sorry, my team's chat popping up there. Lots of influencers are saying this is how you have a nice clean home. Absolutely fine, no problem at all. Take pride in your home, that's absolutely fine. However, if there's nothing out of place, there's no sign of children's toys, if they even looks like they even live there, then that could be a sign that this is not actually a happy home. The house is not lived in because it's not allowed to be lived in. Children are allowed to play and enjoy their toys because they are messy and disruptive. And the perpetrator of the abuse doesn't like the home looking that way. And it may be that the victim of the abuse is feeling very scared of anything being dirty. There is something called, well, it has different names, but sort of the blue tack challenge, for example, whereby a perpetrator of abuse will take off little pieces of blue tack and dot them around the house somewhere in lots of different, like a treasure hunt, if you like, but with more of a sinister turn to it. So they will leave for the day and come home, say from work, and go and look for the pieces of blue tack that they left in the morning. And if they should find any, then there will be repercussions, because it means that their victim has not spent the day cleaning. And if they've been cleaning properly, they would have found the blue tack. So there's a lot about this show home appearance that may not be as wonderful as you may think. You may walk in and go, oh wow, you have a lovely home, I wish mine would look like this, it's so tidy. And again, absolutely fine, that's the person's personal choice, but it may be through the fear of what happens if it's not like that. Now, in somebody's behaviour, they may cancel appointments very last minute for a number of reasons. Obviously, life gets in the way. We will have people who cancel appointments, and that's just sometimes the way it is. Now, for domestic abuse, that could be because this person has got physical marks on their body that they can't explain away and they don't want you to see them. It could be there's already social services involvement and they know you have a duty of care to report if you see any marks upon them, so they will cancel. It is better, in their opinion, to cancel the appointment than risk you knowing the truth. They may have to cancel because they physically cannot get to the appointment. They may not be in any harm or in immediate danger, but perhaps they've been locked in their room, locked in their home. Perhaps the car keys have been taken from them. They don't have any money for bus fare or for taxi. The perpetrator took the baby's buggy in the car this morning. Lots of different reasons that may come across as inconvenience, as an annoying for us, but actually there's much more to it. It's like that puzzle I mentioned earlier, and layers of an onion as well. There's always more to it. It's not just they couldn't be bothered to come. They couldn't physically come, or even if the doors are left unlocked and the house is wide open, the fear of attending that appointment when they've been told they're not allowed to go is far greater than the fear of missing the appointment. Partner may wait outside or inside. They may make their presence very well known to you as a practitioner, that they want to be included in your session with them. And you may have to stand your ground and say, you're not supposed to be in this session, it's a one-on-one. Or if they insist upon being in it, then again, that's up to your own policies. However, it is an indicator that this person is controlling their partner and they are not allowed to be on their own. And also the person, the victim of the abuse, may not be able to relax and talk to you openly about their appointment and their session, because they're very aware they're on the clock, that they'll be clock watching and be very aware that somebody is waiting for them elsewhere. They may ask for receipts, so may not apply in this circumstance, but they have to prove and provide evidence of their purchases. So if they bought a loaf of bread and it cost 95 pence, then the receipt must show it cost 95 pence. If they bought the £1.10 loaf of bread, why on earth did they do that? That's not their money, they shouldn't be spending that, and there will be repercussions. They must provide evidence of any financial transactions because of financial abuse. Excuse me. Just going back to partner waiting outside, and whilst I know this can be difficult, we would always say that if English is somebody's second language and they arrive with somebody who is their partner and claims they can interpret for them, as much as that would be easy to go, yes, please do that, make my life much easier, I wasn't expecting this, we've got nobody available, please don't do it. I know that is very time consuming, perhaps costly as well, but you cannot trust that person's interpretation, and we do not know what is actually being said to the victim. They could be being told that we are telling them as a professional that they are wasting our time, they're not supposed to be here, and it's important that we get correct support with that. They're in constant dialogue with a partner, they're clock watching, perhaps they're getting lots of phone calls and text messages, and they talk of debt, less appointments than before, so they're very hit and miss with their appointments. They will leave and return to their same relationship more than once. This will it's very rare that somebody will leave an abusive relationship the first time an incident happens and stay gone, and that is just the way it is, and that's up to us to support them and not make them feel bad for doing so. So how do I find out if somebody is in an abusive relationship? Ask. Now that can seem like a very daunting question to ask, and it's important that we as professionals know we have that safety net in place and safeguarding responsibility, so when somebody does say, yes, I do need support, we know what to do and where to go with that. The best way to help somebody is to ask them, and to ask them in private, where they know their partner is not in earshot, they're in a different room, different building, not behind a closed curtain in A&E where they think their partner may be behind the curtain, very much privately on their own. With asking the question, we can start by explaining the research. 1 in 4 women, 1 in 6 men will be victims of domestic violence / abuse at some point in their lives. Many victims just want you to ask that question. They're waiting. If you've ever heard of Ruddy Doyle and the I can't think of the book that they wrote now, but it's about a nurse and seeing them in A&E repeatedly, and just the victim is saying, please ask me the question, I will tell you what's happening, I need your help, but the question never gets asked. So questions you can ask: do you feel like you're walking on eggshells in your relationship? I can sense that you're feeling worried, you're frightened. Are you afraid of your partner? And do you feel safe at home? Now, chances are, if you've asked these questions, they're probably going to lie and say everything's fine, but keep the conversation going. So with NDAS, our advice line is a 24-hour advice line. We offer safety planning, risk assessments, trauma-informed emotional support, accommodation advice. Of course, we have refuge benefit advice, all sorts of advice regarding children, domestic abuse, the group work programs we offer, signposting to partner agencies. We very much want to work with agencies, and we can't support somebody all by ourselves because that's just not the way it works. So our virtual supports, we have weekly drop-ins. We do them online via Zoom. We have in-person ones as well. Our web chat is available on our website. I believe that is until midnight every day. We have Facebook Messenger up until 9 o'clock at night, and it's monitored again next morning. And we have group work programs online as well, because as like most people during COVID, we had to change how we worked. That slide's quite small, I appreciate that. This is a list of our drop-in services across the county where we are available. And if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm happy to send it to Diana, or you can send it out to people after the call. Again, for our outreach programs, appreciate it comes up quite small on the screen. So again, anything you want literature-wise, I'm happy to send out to everybody. We offer 12-week intensive support programs for all of our programs, really, all different types of ones we have available. Our group work is for adults and children. We have separate ones for women, for men. We have separate ones for children as well. We have our domestic abuse recovery toolkit. We have so much available. We have 9 refuges across our county, which includes a male-only refuge, which is actually one of the only who we have available in the UK. We have a drug and alcohol specialist unit as well, which is man-staffed, 24 hours of a day because it's high risk and high dependency need. We have a diverse refuge for people of different languages, if they want to come to that refuge. We have a female-only refuge. We have flats that we can use for male, female, non-binary or trans clients, or for children who are slightly older. All refuges have spaces for children. And we can support up to 33 people and 52 children at one time in our refuge facilities. So our refuge itself is a confidential address. It is designed to be a safe space for people to escape from domestic abuse. It can be a short stay up until 2 years, depending on immigration status. Of course, we support people through that as well. Within our first 2 weeks, this is a bit about our own internal policies and our own working. We will work with an individual to go through what we call Empowerment Star and devise safety plans, see what this individual needs, because not everybody is the same and everybody will need different things, whether it be applying for benefits, helping with new schooling, GPs, getting back into work, or relocating with work. However it may be, we're there to try and support them with that. And we work with children who have experienced domestic abuse and witnessed domestic abuse. And something really important, actually, is to mention that children are victims of domestic abuse. They are survivors of it. Whether they're upstairs and they've never heard the abuse, as people will say, they've never seen it, they've never heard it. Children have experienced it. They are witnesses, they are victims of it. They are very much aware of what is going on in their family home, and actually probably very confused by what they are not hearing but seeing, and vice versa. So just because they're upstairs does not mean they're asleep. It does not mean that they have not heard anything. And children are we have just recently recruited 7 new children's domestic abuse specialist staff to make an additional team. So we have a lot of children's support services. And with the new recruitment, we are now able to offer our waiting list for group work for children again. So if you do have children in your care who you think would benefit from our service, please do refer them to us. This is a bit about group work. Again, it looks smaller on my screen, perhaps it doesn't on yours, but as I say, if you would like this leaflets, I can send you those. We offer different types of groups, you, me and mum, me and others, many groups available. Now, I want you to share this slide because I felt it was, well, very important, of course, but relevant. As I'm sorry, I should have done a little bit of a trigger warning there. This lady, as you know, was a staff nurse who worked in Kettering. So I'm sorry if some of you are familiar or knew her, in fact. Should have done a warning there, apologise for that. And nobody knew what she was experiencing and going through. And it's just so sad to think that her and her children, hopefully maybe we could have helped. but we know nobody knew what that person was doing to this poor woman and her family. So in memory of her and her children. We have local support available. Again, these slides are being shared, aren't they, of course. So national support available, all different agencies here. And then we have any questions. So if I, do you want me to stop sharing now and then go back to, or does somebody take control over my slide? That's it, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that presentation, Gemma. And you know, I think for a lot of us that was, you know, I found it quite emotional actually listening to the presentation, you know, but this is our reality. We know there's evidence that suggests that more and more people are actually experiencing that domestic abuse. So, you know, whilst it's uncomfortable, we need to understand where to go for help, how to approach people, how to have the conversations. And, you know, I think it's just tragic in terms of the case you shared about Anju and her children. You know, it hits home in terms of how we really need to take this seriously and just think about what we can do. So really, this is, you know, whilst it's a difficult topic, it's an important topic, and really we want to take your comments, your questions. We recognise the sensitivity, so some of you have put your comments and questions in the chat. Some of you will be sharing this via Slido. So just kind of working through the chat, first of all, Diana, can you just kind of help us capture some of those questions, please? You're on mute, Diana.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not muted very often. Right, can I just ask this question? What can you do if you suspect a friend, neighbour, colleague or family member is experiencing domestic abuse?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, of course, that makes things harder for you as an individual. And sometimes, in all honesty, your professional judgment goes out the window because it's somebody you know, somebody you care about, and you feel like you want to be their saviour, their rescuer. And that's completely understandable. But actually, what you can do for that person is let them know that you're there, you're always going to be there, and they can come to you with that need to talk, that need for safety. But you need to understand that they may not want to leave that person yet. They may never want to leave. And that as a friend, family member, that is going to feel very, very uncomfortable for you and very hard, because you know once they're leaving your home or leaving you, they're going back into that abusive environment. Now, as a professional, it's kind of easier to compartmentalise that and say, well, here's the number you need to call, and here's what I'm going to do in my professional capacity. And when it is something personal like that, it is personal, it feels harder, but you can do similar things. You say, well, let's talk. I'm here for you. Here are local support agencies or national. There are options for you. You don't have to leave right now, or we can support you with injunctions, you know, things. If you've got information, then that person will come to you for it. So the more information you have, the more you can support somebody. Best thing you can do is be there for them, be non-judgmental. Don't tell them what they should do, in your opinion. Just advise them that they need to be safe and they deserve to be happy, and here are people who can support them. And for your own safety, never challenge the perpetrator of the abuse, or even let on that your friend or family member has talked to you about it, because that will put that person in danger and yourself and risk isolating them from you in future. I hope that helps.
Right, thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to take some questions in the chat. Feel free to raise your hands as well, and we'll pick up the questions that have been submitted through Slido. There was a question from Carol Cooper. how can you help the carer who's getting very frustrated of an ill husband?
How can we help the carer who's getting very frustrated of an ill husband?
Yeah.
Is the ill husband the abuser, or how? Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the question, perhaps.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can hear.
Okay, great. Obviously, it's confidential, but what it is, my friend cares for her husband who has Parkinson's, and she's always doing things for him, but when there's any response expected from the husband, he just blanks her. She gets nothing, no emotional contact or support, at all. And she finds it really upsetting and very frustrating, and I'm kind of worried that she might just lose it completely. I know she's already throwing plates. I don't think she's throwing them at somebody, but to me, because I spoke to her yesterday, I thought it's a sign that it's all getting too much for her, and I'd absolutely hate for her to commit some sort of crime when it's done out of frustration and despair.
Absolutely.
Really, that's it. It's just, she would never have been like this, but she gets absolutely no support at all.
She's gone from being a partner to being a full-time carer, from the sounds of it, and getting, obviously with Parkinson's, it's very degenerative, part of the word, degenerative disease. I would suggest perhaps talking to the specialist within Parkinson's as well.
So talking to who?
Is there a Parkinson's support perhaps, or is there a part of the NHS that helps with this illness?
Yeah, I'll find out, yeah.
So thank you. I think someone just popped in the chat there, Northamptonshire carers talking therapies as well, so that she can get support as a carer, because it sounds like she certainly needs some respite from the situation. And as you say, you don't want her to commit any kind of crime or something towards her partner. So she's asking for help, she's asking for support, and she's come to you, which is fantastic.
Yeah, but she doesn't live here. She sorry, I've got a cough. It's not nerves. She lives near Bath, so she's not around here.
There will be relevant services for her within those areas still. It sounds perhaps more like she needs support for dealing with her emotions and how to with caring for someone. That's extremely challenging, and it's not just caring for someone; it's caring for her partner, and also there's a grief there as well of what she thought her future would be for them as a couple. There's a lot for them to perhaps talk through together, but certainly I would suggest that she does get support from professionals within those fields, definitely. And it's fantastic she's identifying her own behaviour as being negatively impacting on the relationship, but also for her own health and well-being as well. But yeah, best advice I could give is that she looks into, or perhaps you can, for her relevant support agencies in Bath, really.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for the response. We've got a question from Claire Amy just about if anyone contacts you online, is this hidden from their history?
So on our website we have the quick exits, and that will take you to BBC website instead. It's just a generic search engine, so it will erase what you've been doing. It won't appear on search history.
Great question from Claire. Sarah Claire. Are any drop-in clinics available in hidden areas, such as upstairs in Tesco's, etc.? Thinking about how people can get to talk to you safely, if so monitored. Yeah,
absolutely. We run drop-ins from lots of different places, such as libraries as one identifiable place. So as I'm sure we're aware, libraries offer lots of different resources nowadays. There's little rooms that are private. We can go and use those rooms. We have definitely used supermarkets before, and we have councils as well. So it just looks like you're going to the council to for any reason really. We use the rooms that they have available there as well. So nobody in the waiting area would know you were there waiting to see the domestic abuse person. It would just be you're called into, say, room 4, the same as somebody else in the waiting area. So as much as we obviously, it's that catch-22, we want to advertise that we are somewhere, so if you need us, come and talk to us, but also we're very aware that we're not going to put a big flashing red sign saying this is the domestic abuse person, come and speak with us, because of course we want to keep your confidentiality and your safety.
Yeah, fantastic. Sarah's just mentioned about the support that's available through Talking Therapies as well, and so please do follow that link. We are actually asking, we have actually said we were going to share the slides as well. There are some comments on that. I just wanted to check, Mariam, was there anything from Slido we wanted to just run through while we've got a couple of minutes?
I've just shared that, yeah.
Thank you. Gemma?
How common is grooming of grandchildren? What are the signs you often see? Now, that isn't something I'm perhaps a specialist on, in all honesty. Signs of grooming in general would, well, as I say, I'm not the specialist on this one, so I wouldn't like to give a definitive answer on that, other than to say we do work with children who have been groomed, who are experiencing abuse, sexual abuse, perhaps from their relations, their grandfathers, uncles, fathers, so we can offer support to those children. We do have specialist children's domestic abuse support officers who work with us, and if that's a question you would like to ask, you can contact us to do so. I appreciate you've asked this anonymously though. So signs that you would often see are perhaps then, if I give a very quick explanation of my understanding. So signs you may see can vary from child to child, of course, but a child may seek lots and lots of attention from, say, teachers, try and be the best person they could possibly be, want to be the top student. They're overly affectionate with other adults. They don't want to communicate with other children. They want to be with adults. They want gratification from adults because that's what they've been led to believe they should do. They may complain of stomach aches a lot of tummy pains. There is a lot that can happen with grooming, and I really wouldn't give it the justice it deserves in my question here, to be honest with you. That is a question you can email us if you have got a confidential email address or anonymous email address, perhaps a admin @ for example, rather than your own name, and we will happily respond that question to you. I'm sorry I can't really give much more than that on that one. As a receptionist, if I notice a change in behaviour, now always attending with someone being on the edge, how can I speak with them without raising suspicion? Okay, so perhaps in that instance, check your own policies and procedures. If you have a domestic abuse policy, see what that would say. I would also suggest perhaps you can ask them to come up to reception because you need to fill in a form. Ask them, or can you come in the back and just fill this form in for me? Sorry, the room's really small. We'll just have one person at a time. Those kind of things. Or we say we can't have somebody attend and chaperone your appointment with you. If they're always being attended and they're never going to be alone, if you don't feel you can have that space to ask them to come separately, you can try and slip them a phone number, or even just have domestic abuse literature or a phone number on the counter by reception. So when they come in and you're seeing them, if they come up to the desk, of course this is, just have that number there. And sometimes all you can do is hope that they're going to see the number, see the information, and you're not necessarily giving them it, but they're seeing it. And I also appreciate a lot of times now GP receptions or places have login self-service machines. Perhaps again, just put DA related literature around those machines, so when they're typing in their information, say yes, I'm here for my appointment, they can also be looking up without fear too much anyway that the person is noticing what they're doing. Is it domestic abuse if the perpetrator has health conditions which causes them to lose control of their behaviour? Now that's a good question, because there are of course health conditions that can have very negative effects on relationships. I know through family experience of my own that Alzheimer's has caused my own granddad to become quite violent and aggressive, and that was something he certainly never would have done without this illness. And so you can kind of look to it in that respect. Is it the illness? Were they like it before the illness? And if the answer is no, they weren't like it before the illness, then perhaps the illness has played a part in this. And it's a very, very hard thing to do because, of course, people will often use health conditions as an excuse for their violence and their bad behaviour. And if that is what someone is experiencing, it's very easy for them to say, they don't mean to do this, it's because of their health issues. And actually, that's the question to ask a health professional and say, is this a common side effect of their health condition? Should I be tolerating this? Can you help me? Last one, just a comment. If a child discloses something, they should always be believed. Sorry, if a child discloses something, they should always be believed. An abuser will always have an excuse and denial, but a child will tell the truth. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If a child is able to disclose something, has put their confidence and trust in us, always believe them. We must always let them know that we believe what they are saying. They are completely in the right and their abuser is completely in the wrong. We will always listen to them and let them know that what has happened to them should never have happened and there is no excuse for what's happened to them. I'm sorry if some of those answers didn't seem very definitive, but I wouldn't want to give a answer as something that I'm not, let's say, the expert in as such. So certainly the grooming one, I would seek a specialist advice where possible, really.
That is fantastic, Gemma, and thank you, colleagues that have actually shared questions, comments, thoughts. Really pleased that in the chat we've actually got some links in terms of where we can go for support. Jackie, thank you for putting them in. And then Claire, really important point about child protection is everybody's business. Gemma, thank you so much for a fantastic session. We're going to continue with our sessions about looking after keeping you and your team safe. So this is the first of 2 sessions. We want to spend some time as well now talking about depression, loneliness and well-being. So if we can move to our second session, that'd be fantastic. Please do continue to connect in with our Northamptonshire Domestic Abuse Service. We've got some great expertise, great experience. It's important that we continue to work through anything that's surfacing in our heads and make sure that we get the support, we get the answers in order to be able to help ourselves, our families and those people we interact with at work. Thank you very much. So if we can, Mariam, move on to the next session, that'll be fantastic. Gemma, I'm just thinking if there are more questions, are we all right to leave that slide or link open, and are we all right to share them with you and we can come back to colleagues accordingly? Is that would that be okay?
Absolutely. Whatever.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the slide or link will stay open if there are any other questions that are rising now that you think, right, actually, I just want to check this out. We've got our expert on domestic abuse that's able to link with us. Okay, if we move on to the next slide. Okay, so it gives me pleasure to introduce Dr. Sarah Clay from Talking Therapies, who's actually going to be running the second part of today's Leadership Matter session on depression, loneliness and wellbeing. Over to you.
Thank you. I hope you're, yes, all still with me. Thank you very much, Gemma. That was a really, just really lovely overview and just access and access for people in general and how hard you're working to try and support the community is amazing. So good work. So yeah, I'm going to try and follow that now. So I'm going to be talking about depression, loneliness and well-being. So I'm hoping this try and keep it as light as we can do given the topic area today, and I guess what we, again, I know it was raised at the beginning, but if there's anything that we're talking about that impacts you, then please reach out, let us know, and obviously we can offer some time and space to debrief afterwards as well. Okay, so I'm going to think a little bit about depression in general. It's really prevalent, and not surprisingly, given the last few years that we've had, it's been a very difficult time, I think, for us as a community, nationally, given the pandemic and the the conflicts that are around in the world, and it can feel a pretty difficult place to be at the moment. There's lots of financial hardship and breakdowns of relationships, and thinking, you know, about sort of Gemma's presentation, thinking about the referrals coming in. We were starting to think a little bit within I'm from Talking Therapies, which is IAPT, which is a primary care therapy service, and I think, you know, we're already talking about, you know, can we do something around trying to do a group or something. We have sometimes people phoning in and saying, I can't manage my anger, I can't manage my frustration, I need support in terms of it's impacting my relationship. So I think there is opportunities, certainly for some people that are noticing that actually they're having difficulties with communication or expressing themselves or being loving or caring, whether there's work to be done. Certainly breakdown in family relationships between children and parents, we're seeing an awful lot of that at the moment. And again, you know, whether there's something around just basic interpersonal skills, communication skills, certain as appropriate boundaries, what's okay and not okay in relationships. I do think there's something that we need to be thinking about there. We're seeing a massive rise in issues interpersonally, and of course alongside that we're seeing a massive rise in depression. I think one of the pluses, and I don't know whether that's the same in your service, Gemma, is that we're seeing an increase in referrals, certainly to our service, of people trying to access support. However, nationally the statistics aren't great in terms of accessing support. We have statistics at the moment, just looking at depression, which is the remit for today, that 1 in 6 people in the UK are experiencing depression, and women seem to be twice as likely as men. But when we're looking at the statistics in terms of outreaching to treatment, only 15% of women are actually in receipt of treatment for low mood, and only 9% of men. And I think there's some difference sometimes about how people present, and that can be, you know, across sort of gender, ages and community. Some people experience depression and that can be quite introverted and feel very self-attacking, and you'd find people withdrawing. But sometimes people, when they're depressed and, you know, can get frustrated, and actually that can come across as being quite angry at times. So I think it can present quite differently. But the important thing is, at the moment, is although I think people would acknowledge that they're suffering from some degree of distress and depression, people aren't always accessing care. And that's a lot of the work of the service that we do, is try to get out there on the radio, on bus shelters and advertising everywhere, you know, working with GPs, pharmacists everywhere that we can work with, in terms of trying to encourage people to access psychological therapies and coping strategies. Some of that can be, we do a lot of signposting to NDAS and you know, lots of sort of the sort of abuse or past offence or assault services and counselling, Northamptonshire Cares. We do a lot of signposting out, because I think when people come in, there's one thing that we can do in terms of coping strategies, but there might be practical or you know, solutions or teams that can work around, or we can work in a little group with the GP as well, family members if that's appropriate, to try and support people coming in. It is a broader spectrum sometimes of thinking around the support. So encouraging people to into front doors is really important, so we can start thinking about what services are best to sort of meet the needs, really. Had a look at, because obviously I was thinking about this more as a leadership matters, and that you are leaders or in your teams, just thinking about where depression is in terms of employees. 56% is sort of the latest stats on that. And again, we've got female employees are 20% more likely to experience symptoms. What we're seeing, and I think this would pan out a little bit more about the youth of today, as it were, is that we used to see an awful lot of depression sort of throughout the sort of much sort of working age and older adults, but actually we've got a massive increase in depression in much younger people between the ages of 16 and 24. Lots more you know, unprecedented coming towards services now than we've ever really had before. So that's really quite high, that this particular age group is struggling more in general, and that's 61% at the moment. But as you say, overall everything, only 10% are actually sort of seeking support, and that's a concern, and that's something that we want to, hopefully with reaching out today and raising awareness and thinking about depression, noticing it in colleagues, noticing it in people you're working with, is trying to encourage people to go to GPs, to go to access. There's all sorts of third sector providers, there's mine, there's lots of sort of, you know, there'll be local sort of charities and counselling providers in all of your different areas, but also in every county there's a talking therapies. It's nationally, it's free, it's often NHS, it's not always. There's always a phone number, and I'll put that in the chat. Well, I think I put it in the chat earlier for someone else. So that's the 0300 is our local number. But if you go through our website, there's links. You can come in lots of ways. Some people don't like an assessment, they want to come straight into getting some of the strategies. So there's all different ways of coming in that's on our website, but accessing support is really, really very, very important. So quite high levels of depression, and when you're thinking about, as Diana said at the beginning, you know, the time of year that we're heading into, why this session's so important now is that sometimes Christmas is a really difficult time of year, you know, in terms of the pressures financially, family time. You know, we see lots of high incidence of abuse and domestic abuse and low mood and people feeling very distressed at this time of year. So being thoughtful about that in terms of keeping yourself and your team well, and the people that we serve in terms of our population, is really, really key to have a bit of an eye out for when low mood is around. I mean, there's lots of talking a bit about low mood. I'm you know, not going into lots of detail with Gemma's, but in general, I think, you know, low mood presents as people, you see people start to sort of duvet hide. You know, you might find if it's a colleague, they stop doing the sort of work and having the energy to do the work. They may be more tearful at work. They start to do less in general. You might see an increase in sickness or performance in some ways, mistakes starting to come in, or they're withdrawing. If there's social things or conversations happening, they don't tend to be turning up to these things. They're looking quite flat in terms of their emotion. You haven't got the same animation in terms of how people are interacting with others. People are isolating more. Or as I said, some people can be, and I'll talk a little bit in this around sort of burnout. You might get the sort of stress and anger sort of presentation we'll think a little bit about later. Some people start exhibiting sort of self-neglect, so they're not sort of bathing or brushing their teeth. So you might start to see people looking a little bit more unkempt than usual. They're losing focus, or they're exhibiting quite negative styles of thinking. So they're actually there's quite a range of styles of thinking that we associate with depression. So it might be around, you know, focusing on the negative and thinking that everything's not going to work out, or personalizing things, starting to feel like they're to blame for everything that's going wrong. You can have quite extreme sorts of thinking, so everything's either all good or all bad, you know, and often for depressed people, all bad. People talk about the glass half empty. It's the focus is on the lack of, and they have quite a sort of a negative outlook in terms of the future themselves, and sometimes other people in the world as well. So you get this sort of flat and quite sort of you know, sort of lack of energy focus. And of course what we're concerned about in terms of risk for this population is, for some people that does lead to suicidal thoughts and thinking, sometimes planned and intent and sometimes action. That does and can happen with colleagues sometimes. So that's also, you know, rare, but it can happen, and that's something to be thoughtful and mindful about. If you see a colleague or someone you're working with, or you've got opportunities when you see them that you're starting to see some of these patterns, that it's time to sort of reach out and start having some of those conversations. It's not often we do that with colleagues. We're much more geared up to maybe asking that of the sort of population that we serve, and that's great, and that obviously should be in place. But I guess what we're also thinking about with this difficult time, don't know how much you're aware of your colleagues or people around you's personal experiences or situations over Christmas, but it's something around trying to notice and make sure that the support and those conversations, that we're normalising that. You know, mental health affects all of us, you know, 1 in 4 at some point in our life. So, you know, we are also the service users of these services at times, and we have a lot of staff reaching out and involved with our service and others, and so it's important to take notice, it's important to take care and look out for each other, because what we're wanting to do is early intervention and normalising and making it okay to talk about it, acknowledging, thinking about what you can do as, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, about, you know, supporting and helping colleagues that may be more distressed around, typically it's around flexibility, understanding our things going on, you know, something going on at home, is something going on, you know, because often if that's a change, it's possibly because actually it's something to do with something else completely. It's just an indicator for you to be asking those questions and to making sure that things are all well and safe at home, and often with our colleagues, because we're not immune either within our service, and we think about flexible working or time off, or some people don't want that, but they'd like maybe a change of the type of role or the type of work they're doing, or less hours, or, you know, or different hours to, you know, help a particular stress point if they can do flexi hours. So, you know, we try to find out a lot more initially when we see that things aren't quite right, you know, thinking about how we can be helpful in the first instance, and sometimes just even quick pick up at that for colleagues early on can prevent this becoming more and more severe and distressed in the service. I'm not sure, because obviously we've got various services here. You might have to find out in your local area what staff support's available. Often there's things like occupational health support. We have in NHFT the Stronger Together, so there's bespoke staff support. You may have something equivalent in your own areas. Talking therapies, as I say, we're everywhere, so that's a free service. So that's often a place, and often, well, always pretty much with the talking therapies, one of the things that staff like is that our records are off the books, so we don't write on people's medical records unless there's a particular risk and we need to share that, because actually there's a risk that's occurring that we need to involve our crisis support teams. If there's a need to be anonymous, then certainly we have an option for people to almost have a soft referral or get in touch with us and go, look, you know, a staff member, I want to come in through the back door, and make sure that, you know, notes are locked, and we do that for people. So there's all sorts of ways that we can, that support can be there. It's just making sure that all of your colleagues are aware of the support and the routes in, and being able to access that as soon as they can, and be aware of whatever your local offer is in terms of crisis support. So sometimes, you know, everyone will have their own local option for that, but often there's a lot of colleagues speaking and gently, and being very thoughtful about managing and locking notes and being very careful. But for talking therapies in the main, certainly there's no risk. You know, people have their own sort of private therapy and support within those services, and that's not on any level record, and doesn't have to, you can be very private and confidential. Just in terms of thinking a little bit about how we particularly work, there's lots of different models around, but certainly just to sort of share, I guess, a little bit about what our service would think about and do. This is an example of a vicious cycle and what depression would look like, and how we would frame it, really. These are the sorts of, this is an example of someone's sort of hot cross bun or CBT cycle, depends how you've heard of it before. But what will tend to happen is that events are happening, or that there's some sort of trigger, or it could be just waking up in the morning sometimes, and then we'll start to see that, you know, all of these elements all impact each other, which is why all the arrows are going in all the directions. So you might wake up, you might not have slept very well, you might have loads of body sensations, you know, you've got tight chest, or you're feeling lethargic and you're just not feeling it. And then, you know, you're feeling quite sad and miserable, maybe you're a bit worried because actually there's lots of things you've got to do that day, and then the stress comes in because you don't feel like you've got the energy or the wherewithal to be able to do it. Thoughts are there, I can't be bothered, I'm useless, what's the point in me even trying? And over time, you know, leads to people that withdrawal that we're talking about. So stop doing all the things that were necessarily actually helpful for you and lifting mood. It might be, you know, communicating with others, speaking to people like your partner, stopping doing hobbies and interests that you know, typically have been maybe filling your bowl in terms of energy and nourishment, and stopping doing a lot of things. And of course, therefore, the less we do know people that are isolated at home more doing less and more likely to get depression. Of course, as you stop doing those things, then you're more likely to have depression and low mood and less, more sleep problems and more physical health issues, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. So these are the things we sort of look at, and this is how we would look at it in our service. And what we would then do is try to work with different elements within the model. So within that sort of hot cross bun. So behaviour is typically the first thing we would look at. So that's something you can think about for your staff groups. If you have someone that's feeling quite low, you go, well, okay, what as well as a referral to us, have a little look. Are they stopping doing things that they need to do? Could they start maybe doing things before they feel like doing things? We do know that activity can increase and shift mood. So that's why we're quite thoughtful about the activities and what people are doing and what coping strategies and hobbies and interests they have outside of work. Could you be talking to them about that? Actually, it's really important. Could I shift work around so that you maybe one of the things that's impacted is that you stop doing that Zumba class because it's changed time and now it's in work time. Could we be flexible for that? So that's something that's really important for you to go to, so it's all thinking around these sorts of things, getting people more activated, getting people doing the more pleasurable, not just having to go, well, I've only got energy for the chores, so I'm only going to do that. That depletes energy, depletes mood, you get into a negative cycle. So can we change something else that's up, change the routine, help them and support them accessing things that's going to be helpful for them, as well as obviously doing the things we've got to do because we've got to do those things. So we would start to work a lot more with, getting a real plan of actually what they're doing. And sometimes that can be a shock for people. They can go, well, okay, let me look at my last week. God, I didn't move, I didn't leave the house, I did 2 things in 7 days, and actually realise there's such a paucity in the sort of things that they're doing, that actually just trying to start building that back up, getting a routine, getting a schedule, getting a mix of the things you have to do and the pleasure can be really life-changing for quite a few, quite a lot of people quite quickly. So that might be something, a tool and a technique you might want to think about with your staff group. It might be, if you think about your staff group, they're going through a really stressful time, you want to structure and think about good, something fun for your staff team to do to sort of boost morale and just give them some downtime, really. Thoughts are the other area we really think about. I mean, that's probably a bit more our remit, but we would be working with the unhelpful styles of thinking that I talked about earlier. So there's some examples, but we would keep positive logs, we would look at diary work, and we would introduce some psycho-ed around unhelpful styles of thinking and get people to actively start to challenge those things. Because what happens with depression, it sort of happens, you get the negative thoughts, but you don't really challenge it or do anything with it, just sits there and has all this influence, as you can see in the hot cross bun. And then what our processors would do would be to go and look at them and go, do you know what, actually, is it that you're useless? You're useless all the time at everything, and then we start to actually go, well, actually, no, that's probably an exaggeration. And we'd start to get people to start chipping away at that and having, a more balanced view of themselves. None of us are perfect. We're not expecting everyone to see themselves as perfect and the world as poppies, but at least get to a place of what feels more reasonable. And therefore we might get sadness rather than depression, and then that would be, we're sad at times. And so we're trying to work to something that feels more balanced. So there's, within our service, just to sort of say a little bit about our service really briefly, as I said, there are lots of other services that you can access, but step 2, within talking therapies, certainly within Northamptonshire, I'm not sure about the wait times in other places, we would put in some of that work quite quickly within a couple of weeks of a referral, having an assessment and getting into treatment. There's lots and lots of mediums for that, so that's individual, and that can be telephone, video, all face-to-face, groups, webinars there in the evening. We can do online programs. Some people like accessing things because they can just dip in and out of a program 24/7. So there's lots of different ways people can access some of those coping strategies really, really quickly. And at step 3, that there's a broader offer, and obviously we've got other, listed some of the other things that we do, because depression isn't always on its own. Sometimes it's very much linked with anxiety. Sometimes it can lead to and be linked with things like social anxiety. People become low self-esteem, less secure, start feeling more worried about how they're coming across in general. Sometimes a withdrawal behaviour is actually associated with trauma, so it can, obviously that would be our job to try and assess that. But at step 3 we have CBT, which is the sort of model they would do that at a deeper level, and much more broader sort of formulation work, and much more looking at core beliefs at step 3. but also in our local, and there will be a push and a range of this in all talking therapies. We have counselling for depression, couples counselling if depression's been impacting a relationship. There's interpersonal therapy, dialectical interpersonal therapy. So these are more sort of psychodynamic short-term counselling options for depression. So you'll find that in your local talking therapy. So that is worth looking and sourcing locally to try and sort of look at the support. But there's quite a wide range. You get step 2 quite quickly, and then people get a lot of coping strategies. For most, that's fine. But some people will need the higher level support. So there's quite a lot of variety of ways of being able to work with depression. So, and the efficacy and the recovery rates are good, you know. So it's just about being able to, I guess, hopefully normalise and help and support people recognising that maybe this is something that would be helpful for them going forward. So because of the title, because it was like keeping you and your team, I was actually also wanting to write a little bit about burnout in this. So because they can have some similarities, we'll go over burnout a little bit, and it might be something that you can recognise can have some overlap. Burnout is related to feelings of stress, you know, cumulative, ongoing stress that feels overwhelming, can occur in any professional setting. So ours is you know, in terms of the sort of work and outreach we do, you know, the sorts of things we're exposed to, we can anticipate this is a highly stressful sort of work area that we're all involved with. What you find is that people feel out of control and of a very stressful situation, and if that is ongoing over time, you can start to get burnout, work stress. It's a lack of sort of joy in work, and you can tend to see that people start to feel exhausted, being quite cynical. And if it's connected to burnout, they'll probably be more cynical about work stuff that actually aren't cynical outside of work. So that starts to gear you towards the burnout rather than depression. But that's something that we need to look at, and thinking about people just feeling like they're being ineffective in the workplace. So again, if we took our sort of 5 areas, a hot cross bun, you can have a look looking at the sort of, you will see people in terms of affect and emotion, they will look quite flat, they will look very depressed. Burnout can lead to depression. Depression doesn't lead to burnout, but burnout can lead to depression. So it is something I wanted to put in here, even though burnout wasn't in the title, but because I think it is strongly associated with depression, certainly in a work environment. So if you're thinking about keeping you and your team safe, we do need to be aware of burnout risk factors and all of that. So cognitively, you know, you'll start to see people with poor concentration, people again with more physical issues, headaches, sleep disturbances. Again, you're going to see that poor work performance, motivation, loss of, you know, that cynicism comes in and all that stuff. But the main thing is this level of exhaustion. And if you have that conversation, if you're starting to see people exhibiting symptoms of burnout, then, you know, you'll be able to ascertain quite quickly whether there are things going on at home, whether there's abuse or certain situations going on, whether there's a much more general sort of depression that's happening, or whether actually this is work related, and hopefully it's creating the ambience and the relationship so that you can have an honest conversation about that. The causes of burnout.
Sorry, Sarah, just to say, I'm just conscious of the time.
Yeah.
And I think this is absolutely excellent content. I'm just mindful we've got our session on the 30th as well. So if we could have maybe a minute or two, and then let's take some questions, comments, and then let's continue this brilliant content at the second section, if that's doable.
Yes. So what about the well-being bits? Is that something you want me to just jump to? I haven't done those. I'll try and be really quick.
I think we can pick that up next time, Diana, if you're comfortable with that. Yeah, we'll manage it, because this is such excellent content. It's been such a brilliant session. So if we could just finish this section on burnout, colleagues, there is a Slido link. Please do put your questions in Slido. We'll try and respond to some of the questions today, and we'll continue this at the next session. So please do carry on, Sarah. Sorry to interrupt, but maybe just a couple of minutes, and then we can take some comments and questions.
Okay. So causes of burnout, obviously you've had probably hopefully a little look at that, but obviously they are situations that we work with all the time. And the other thing I wanted to mention is loneliness. Loneliness has been highly reported, so you'll get some of these slides. So I guess you'll have a look. It's not not that sort of, you know, a surprise that there's quite a few people that are lonely in the world. These are the risk factors. So people particularly isolated, like I said, especially with that low mood and depression, people that are isolated at home. So people who are widowed, single, living alone, you know, unemployed, not feeling that there's positive structure coming in. Or, you know, part of that is connected to, especially having a long-term health condition, you can't do the things that you used to do. Again, this young age is coming in quite being a carer, which has been raised today, but also being from ethnic minority community, LGBTQIA+, you know, are also risk factors to be aware of if you've got colleagues that you're thinking about. Shall I just do the organisational ones? Okay, what can you do and to think about? Think about a team culture, a group and self-care. Make this normal, make this part of your normal, creating a safe environment to express feelings and this to be okay. Also thinking about every opportunity you have, you know, keeping an eye out, but supervisions, line management, you know, making sure at the beginning you're checking in, are you okay? I mean, obviously that happens in appraisals too, but making sure that you know, you've got those conversations, opportunities, making sure you get moments for that socializing, fun and humor. Obviously ensuring, if you're knowing that the team or particular person's caseload or workload has been really heavy, how do you flex and make sure that that's balanced or that they have some downtime. Creating buddy systems can be really helpful too. I do have some self-care slides in here. There's about 3. Breathing.
Can we start with that next time? That would be fantastic. Yeah. I think this content is absolutely fantastic, and I really want us to give this the time it needs, and I'd love us to pick this up on the 30th. I'm just mindful of the time, and just if anybody's got any kind of comments, questions, thoughts that they want to bring up, we'll continue this on part 2 of keeping yourselves and your team safe. We'll pick this up. So just we'll take a couple of questions and then we'll carry on with the questions next time as well. So next time it's stress, debt management, domestic abuse, well-being tips. All of this conversation can continue next time. We don't want to rush this content because it's so important. And this has been a fabulous session. We've had some great feedback. So just have we got lots of questions on Slido, Mariam? Let's just check where we are.
We've got about 5 questions on Slido at the moment.
Okay, so let's start with the Slido questions, and what we'll do, even if we get through 2 or 3, we'll capture those that are actually in the chat. We'll keep Slido open and they'll pick this up next time as well. Does that work, Diana, if we do it that way? Okay, over to you, Sarah.
Did you say someone was going to ask the questions from Slido? Oh, here we go. Okay. What are the symptoms for children suffering as they could be perceived as different? Absolutely. I think we get an awful lot of adults that present to us that will have been suffering depression that have been negatively labelled. People that are often in environments where they felt we've got certain basic requirements as a kid, you know, to be looked after, sheltered, protected, made safe, you know, fostering dependence into independence and being emotionally responded to so that their emotions, when they're expressed, are validated and responded to appropriately. Kids that don't get that tend to get depressed, and when they get depressed, sometimes it comes out as behaviour and difficulties with concentrating, difficulties in school. So you will tend to get kids acting out, you know, or seemingly acting out. Again, you might see the typical depression and withdrawn child, but you also might see someone that's you know, sort of doing quite a bit of antisocial behaviour, just sort of their frustrations coming out in a different way. Again, there are CAMs. There's also talking therapies for young people as well. So that is available typically in your area as well. So we tend to do 17.5 and older in the adult one, but yeah, there are some child branches as well. So assessments, I've got quicker now. We used to be on the day or the day after. I think probably get one probably within a week now. The step 2, it depends if you're waiting for a group, but if not, or beginning of a webinar, but the individuals can be within a week or 2 typically. So that's, yeah, we're quicker. I think, you know, people have a sort of a bit of a myth that NHS waiting are so long we're not getting access, but it depends what you come in for. But step 2 is pretty much, we get coping strategies in, even if we think it's going to be step 3 later, we try and work quite quickly with people because you want the support now. So there's only people that probably been through us a couple of times that sort of go, well, I've done step 2, that we go, okay, our counselling internally is around 3 to 4 months. If you've done it's a 3-month piece of work with step 2, it might be that you wait and do a bit of step 3, and there can be a little bit of a wait there. But what we do is we monitor you, you know, we have monthly reviews, we sometimes do some online coping strategy stuff, so you're doing stuff quite actively whilst on the wait list, and at the moment that's around 5 to 6 months depending on what area you're in, really. So it depends, so it's different weights at different points really, but typically relatively quick considering some people's wait lists are, you know, 6 months to a year or something, so not too bad. Can I make a referral on behalf of my team colleague? No. Someone really needs to be ready or able to engage in therapy, and so, you know, you can't do that on behalf of someone else. They've ideally really got to, because they're going to be the one that's going to have to have the assessment and answer the questions. They've got to be motivated and want to engage. Otherwise, you know, it's about, I guess, sharing and just say, look, this is what's happening. This would be the number. This would be the website, and I'll put that in the chat at the end. In order to access the support, and try to encourage them to do it really. Otherwise, it won't really work. They won't answer the phone call for the assessment, and it will fall over. Well, I think there's lots of things to do. I mean, certainly coming in and talking to us, tends to be, I'm lonely, I've got no family, dreading Christmas. There's loads of social prescribing services. So Spring, I'm amazed by Spring. This is the people particularly have a long-term condition, but social prescribers will do that much more on an individual basis for general population. But Spring have done some interesting stuff, like they'll go round, they work with people for a year, and they'll go around, look at your hobbies and interests, and they set up things like, so we had some people that were interested in you know, having pets but couldn't have pets, and then you had lots of people that were sort of depressed with pets and didn't really know people, and actually they brought those groups together for dog walks. So they're really quite creative in creating. So for Spring or social prescribing, they're geared, there's Action for Happiness, they're all over. If you look at their website, they've got places, and again, that's much more about communities coming together and doing things. So Delapre Abbey is one of the sites. I think there's other sites in Kettering all over the county where Action for Happiness will work on some social contact and much more about communities coming together. Obviously, working with us, we would, again, as part of your looking at your structure and your routine, would help you think about connecting with in the community and setting up that as part of your diary work and getting you out and about. We've got peer support workers that, if you're a bit nervous going to the first, I don't know, yoga class, you know, they go along with you, and so we have peer support workers that would work alongside our step 2 workers to get people out and about and just connecting with people, which is so important. So that might be something you might be interested in. Is lockdown still affecting people and your workloads? Loneliness must have been so high. Yeah, lockdown has been.
Can this be the final question, please, Sarah? Just final question, and then we'll keep this going. Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, yes, I think we've seen a massive increase in referrals since lockdown, and yeah, I think in a way, as I said, it's the worst setting conditions for depression, isn't it, to be locked down in your own home, and maybe your job's you know, at risk, or you're not able to do it in a way that you enjoyed doing before. You're missing those little social contacts. So loneliness was huge, and we feel now we're almost in the mental health pandemic, but you know, some of the aftermath, whether it's the trauma of certain things, you know, grief, bereavement and depression and lockdown, and the impact on well-being and welfare and finances has been huge, or relationships, as we've talked about today.
Fantastic, and thank you, colleagues, for your questions. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, sharing your links in the chat, and sharing your questions on Slido. We do want to continue this. We've got our session taking place on the 30th. We want to carry on having these conversations about looking after ourselves, looking after our team. So we are going to keep the Slido link open. So please do keep sharing your questions, your thoughts. We are actually going to do that for both sessions. And we're really going to focus on those wellbeing tips and some of the other elements that we need to pick up next time. But can I just thank both of our speakers for a fantastic session. I think it's been brilliant and we've gained so much from this. This topic is so important. Can I also ask all of you during this festive period to look after you, to keep yourself safe, to look after your teams, to look after your families, recognising some of the challenges that many of us experience. I will hand back to Diana and Mariam. Before I hand back, just Diana and Mariam and everybody that's been involved in this, thank you so much for all of your time, effort, energy that's gone into putting on a fantastic session. Over to you, Diana.
Thank you, Bina. Just want to say thank you to Gemma and Sarah for today as well, and also to you, the audience, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be able to support sessions that's going to be affecting you and your team. If we can just go down through the slide deck, please, Mariam, to the last few slides. We realise that today's topics can be quite emotional and heart-wrenching topics and could cause triggers. So what we'd like to do is to be able to provide information where you can go to for support. Please don't sit and suffer in isolation. There are people out there that will be reaching out to you to make sure that you're supported. I'm not sure whether Marion can move the slide forward, but if she doesn't, it's not a problem because we can send that information out to you. Your feedback is a gift. We want to continue to deliver sessions like this to support you and to support your team. So we will be sending out some feedback information so that you can give us that feedback so we can shape and deliver sessions just like this that you need. But without further ado, what can I say? Thank you for supporting today. Please remember that on the 30th of January, we will be delivering another session for you and your team to keep you well with your team. That will be about managing stress. We'll be looking at debt management, domestic abuse, and also some well-being tips. So we will continue, as Bina said, this conversation. So I can see wonderful comments in the chat, but to close the session, thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.